Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Rudomin, and we are continuing our series on the chapters of Genesis. We're going to be doing chapter 3 today. So if you have an edition in your house of the Torah, the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, you can read along with me. I'll be using the Aryeh Kaplan edition of the Living Torah, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, his translation of the Living Torah. And it's published by Maznayim Publishing. First published in 1981. And it is available at Jewish booksellers online. I recommend you get it. It's a very contemporary type of translation, and I really like it a lot. In addition to which, I'll be using the additional commentaries of this book, the Midrash says, and it's called the Book of Bereshis. It goes by the Hebrew transliteration. In Hebrew, it says here, Parshiyos HaShavua Lefi Chazal, the portions of the week according to our Jewish sages. And this gives beautiful background information based on various midrashic, rabbinical, oral teachings to the Parsha. I'll be using that. And I'll try to make some reference to Rashi's commentary, famous commentary of Rashi, a rabbi who lived 1,000 years ago. This is a translation and a linear layout. It's called the Pentateuch and Rashi's Commentary, a linear translation into English by Rabbi Abraham ben Isaiah and Rabbi Benjamin Schaffman. So it's an older translation of Rashi, and it's linear. It was published in 1949, but I like it. It's less politically correct, if you know what I mean. They try to convey more of the exact meaning of the words, and I use it. So that's what we'll try to make reference to. Hopefully I can get to it. And I just want to touch on one or two points that we mentioned last week or last time in chapter 2, and that is about the neshama that God breathed into Adam. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim. The way Adam came alive is that God breathed into his apav, his nose, his nostrils, the nishmat, the soul of life. And we said that the sign of a living person is that they have a soul. And I just wanted to add this word, this idea that the word for breathing or breath is neshima, which is the same word as neshama, because when you are breathing, it's a sign that the soul is still inside of you. You know, Hebrew is a fantastic language. It really ties concepts together. That's because it's called the Holy Tongue. It's God's language. So that God inserted the soul through the nose, and happens to be we breathe through our noses. Okay, you can also breathe through your mouth, but primarily the main organ of breathing is the nose. So, and there is one more point, somewhat related, that the letters neshama also spell the word Mishnah, that on a yard site, if you know what that means, it's a Jewish word, Yiddish word, which means of the day each year in commemoration of the death of someone, of a Jewish person, then it's a custom also, if possible, to learn Mishnah. Mishnah is part of the oral Torah, and the word Mishnah has the same letters as the word neshama, because it's a merit for the soul to learn it. So there again, with Hebrew, the same letters just switched around a little bit. You go from neshama to Mishnah. Then I want to touch on an important point, because we are dealing here with the chapters of Genesis and creation, is that, of course, the prevailing scientific view and the prevailing biblical critical view and the prevailing academic view and the prevailing secular and you could say non-traditional, non-orthodox, non-Torah view is that the subjects of Genesis, especially of creation and of the creation of man, is mythology, is a myth. Okay? And this is a way of judging and dismissing what the Torah has to say. But, interestingly, the same people who say it's a myth believe in their own myths. They believe in maybe science fiction. For example, the ancient Romans and Greeks, they had Greek mythology and Roman mythology, so they believed in their own myths and their own ideas of their deities. And today also, believing in evolution. What does it mean to believe in evolution? You can't believe either evolution is a fact or it's not a fact. Okay, so for scientists and for a lot of biologists and modern people, they accept evolution as a fact. But have you ever seen a monkey turn into a human being? Has any laboratory ever seen cells transmutate into living organisms? Besides a frog that becomes, from a little egg, it turns into a tadpole and becomes a frog. But have you ever seen anything like that turn into a human being with a capacity to think, with a capacity to speak, with a capacity to for higher order functioning? Obviously not. So in a certain way, we just change what we believe. They give up the myths, so to speak, of the Bible, but then they go ahead and believes in the myths of science. I know what I'm saying is controversial and might be difficult for people to accept, but after all, we're studying the book of God. We're studying the book of Hashem. So either God is capable of doing everything and anything, or he's not. Either we believe in an absolute God, an all-powerful God, and an omniscient, omnipotent, all-seeing, all-creative, and entirely a super God who can do anything, and that therefore what we are told in the Torah that God does or God presents us with in the narratives of the Torah is possible. Just because we haven't seen it in our own lifetimes doesn't mean it couldn't be. Same thing believing in dinosaurs. Has anyone ever seen a dinosaur? There may have been dinosaurs. They find bones. They find remains, in the ground and so on. They do carbon dating. But no one has ever seen a dinosaur, an actual dinosaur, a live one. We've seen bones, and a lot of the bones are controversial, the way they're found and the way they're put together. They're not always put together in the same order. But even if they are, no one ever saw a dinosaur. And it's, more a Steven Spielberg creation where, Jurassic Park, where people see things and they accept it as true. And coming back to science fiction, people believe, suspend their imagination and watch Star Wars and Star Trek and all kinds of fantasies, Twilight Zone stuff. It's when we wake up, when we stop, when we walk out the theater, when we turn off the TV, when we turn off our computer, we know it's not true. But for a certain amount of time, we suspend our intelligence, we suspend our critical thinking, we suspend our spirituality, and we submit to what's in front of us on a screen or in a book or in any other kind of depiction or in our imagination. So therefore, to accuse the Torah of presenting mythology is very unfair, it's inaccurate, and I'll put it bluntly, it's a lie, and it's not going to get you anywhere. Because how on earth are you supposed to understand the Torah if you say, this is mythology, this didn't happen, this is man-made, this is a book written by people, this part is that, this part is that. So therefore, no wonder they throw out the baby with the bathwater. They throw everything out. So this is an important point. I'll come back to it again and again, because it's important as a foundation for understanding that as Jews, as traditional Jews, as Torah Jews, we believe that the Torah is a divine book. And even though there are many things in it that we do not understand, that are difficult for us, but most of what it says makes sense. Most of what it says does ring true. Most of what it says is acceptable in terms of a moral code. It's basically in line with history. There are things in prehistory that we don't understand. Yes, we don't understand the origins of man and the origins of life and the origins of the earth and the origins of the universe and the origins of everything. Do we expect to, as puny little human beings, do we expect to understand all of that? No. So let's proceed with a little bit of humility and a little bit of caution and a little bit of open-mindedness. All those people who preach about being open-minded when it comes to Torah or Bible or anything to do with religion, suddenly they reject it as narrow-minded. Well, be open-minded about that too, and you'll be surprised what you can learn and what it can contribute to you and to your intellectual and emotional and spiritual and religious development. Okay, so that's my little pitch. Now, we'll be also looking in this chapter a subject that revolves around what they call original sin or cardinal sin, especially in Catholicism. And when people hear of this, they say, oh, Judaism believes in that? I thought only the Catholics believe in that. I thought only fundamental Christians believe in that. Well, guess what? Judaism is a biblical religion. Yes, it's not just about ethics. It's not just about monotheism. It's not just about humanism or ethical humanism or Jewish ethical humanistic outlooks, about tikkun olam and all those wonderful highfalutin ideas. Judaism is a biblical religion. It's based on the Torah, on the Bible. And therefore, we take everything that is written in the Bible seriously. When I say Bible, I'm talking about the Torah, what Christians call the Old Testament. I'm not talking about the New Testament. I do not speak for Christianity. I'm not an authority in Christianity. And I do not accept the New Testament because I'm an Orthodox believing Jew. But we do accept the Torah. It's called the Torah, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, however you want to name it. We're talking about the Old Testament especially. And for Jews, by the way, there is no such thing as Old Testament. It's only one Testament. It's only one Bible. It's only one Torah. And Christianity and its New Testament is a whole other subject that hopefully maybe we'll get to touch upon in future sessions. Okay? Now, because this chapter 3, is so dramatic and unusual, we're going to be introduced to a very, very strange character, the serpent, the snake, primordial snake. And it's very hard for us to understand this, as I said, but let's try to read through the chapter without any interruptions as the Torah presents it. And, the first part of the chapter at any rate, and see how we are presented with this subject. And it says, chapter 3, verse 1, the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild beasts that God had made. The serpent asked the woman, did God really say that you may not eat from any of the trees of the garden? The woman replied to the serpent, we may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, God said, do not eat it and do not even touch it, or else you will die. That's talking about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The serpent said to the woman, "You will certainly not die. Really, God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." That's his argument. The woman saw that the tree was good to eat and desirable to the eyes, and that the tree was attractive as a means to gain intelligence. She took some of its fruit and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, and he ate it. The eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. They sewed together fig leaves and made themselves loincloths. They heard God's voice moving about in the garden with the wind of the day. The man and his wife hid themselves from God among the trees of the garden. God called to the man, and he said, "Where are you trying to hide?" "I heard your voice in the garden," replied the man, "and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God asked, "Who told you that you were naked, that you are naked? Did you eat from that tree which I commanded you not to eat?" The man replied, "The woman that you gave to be with me, she gave me what I ate from the tree." God said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman replied, "The serpent seduced me, and I ate it." God said to the serpent, "Because you did this, cursed are you more than all the livestock and all the wild beasts. On your belly you shall crawl, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will plant hatred between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will strike you in the head, and you will strike him in the heel." Okay, let's just read on till the end of the chapter since it's going well. The woman's curse, that's the little subheading. It's a smaller little section in the Torah itself, subdivided. To the woman, God said, he said, "I will greatly increase your anguish and your pregnancy. It will be with anguish that you will give birth to children. Your passion will be to your husband, and he will dominate you." Now we have the man's curse. To Adam, he said, "You listened to your wife and ate from the tree regarding which I specifically gave you orders, saying, 'Do not eat from it.' The ground will therefore be cursed because of you. You will derive food from it with anguish all the days of your life. It will bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the grass of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat bread. Finally, you will return to the ground, for it was from the ground that you were taken. You are dust, and to dust you shall return." The man named his wife Eve, because she was the mother of all life. God made leather garments for Adam and his wife, and he clothed them. Now here we have finally the final little section in chapter 3 is the expulsion. God said, "Man has now become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now he must be prevented from putting forth his hand and also taking from the tree of life. He can eat it and live forever." God banished man from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove away the man and stationed the cherubim at the east of Eden, along with the revolving sword blade, to guard the path of the tree of life. End of chapter 3. Wow, what a lot of information. It's really dramatic. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. It's a lot. It's a lot to digest. So we have the serpent. Now, who is the serpent? What is the serpent? The speaking serpent. I once had a debate with an editor on Wikipedia. I'm a long-standing Wikipedia editor in the Jews and Judaism sections, as well as Israel. And one editor, Wikipedia has become a cesspool of anti-biblical opinions. They'll quote, especially because it's written in so-called secondary sources. So if somebody wrote something in a book, it's more acceptable than actually quoting the Bible or quoting a traditional biblical commentary. They go by a professor who wrote a book, gets quoted as an authority. And every 5 to 10 years, opinions change, so they've got different opinions. Suffice it to say that they don't like this narrative of Genesis, and they especially don't like the serpent because he speaks. So one of the editors said, like, how can you believe in a Bible that has a story about a speaking snake? How can a snake speak? Well, it happens to be that God gave the power of speech to the serpent. According to the Midrashim, which we'll see in a minute, the serpent was a higher order creature that was originally made to serve man. I mean, why not? I mean, God is in charge, right? So God is creating the world. So God is creating creatures for a certain function and purpose in a certain way. So this is what God created. Like I said, either you believe in a God who has power and can do anything, or you don't. So if you believe in a God who has power, the power to do anything and everything, and controls everything, and sees everything, and does everything, and so therefore he can produce a snake that talks. Why not? He can produce a monkey that sings. I mean, why not? He can do miracles. He can do anything. He created us. He created man. He created the universe. He created everything around us. Why can't he create a snake that talks? If we made it up, we say it's baloney. But it's in the Torah. It's in the Bible, right? It's in the holy books that God gave to Moses, and that's been handed down through the generations to us. So we have the information, and we read it, and we take it in stride. So yes, a speaking snake who was very, very cunning, who was on the top order of all the creatures that God had made. And this snake, unfortunately, became a victim himself of a scheming angel. Now, in God's universe, there are such beings called angels. There is references in the Torah to angels here and there. So there's some spotty references. But in God's domain, angels are spiritual creatures that exist in God's domain. And it's all under God's control. So there is one angel called Samael who was kicked out of was conspired against God and was kicked out of the heavens. And he came down and he influenced the snake, and he's behind it. So the snake is not just the snake, it's the forces of evil behind the snake. The snake symbolizes all the forces of evil, everything that is bad and wrong. So now I want to read to you some background information from the Midrash says. See, the Midrash says, go out and buy it. It's an excellent resource. And this is what it says here. I'm going to have to read, and you can follow. I'm a good storyteller. So the temptation to taste of the tree of knowledge and the sin. All Torah narratives were recorded for us so that we might study and learn from them. Why should the Torah relate to us about Adam's sin? The purpose of the narrative is to make us aware of spiritual dangers we must avoid and to improve our way of life. The angels in heaven exclaimed, "Let us contrive a plan to make Adam sin before his creator." So there you see, like I had mentioned to you in a previous video, that the angels oppose the creation of man. Call it jealousy, call it whatever you want. And they conspired to cause problems for Adam and Eve. Samael was the great master among the angels. He flew down to earth to find a creature suited for the task of tempting Adam and Chava and causing them to transgress Hashem's command. Eve in Hebrew is Chava. He found none as cunning as the snake. Hashem originally intended that the snake be elevated above the rest of the animals by becoming a servant to mankind. For this purpose, he had endowed it with two characteristics. It possessed the power of speech, and it talked upright. So that comes from a medrash or midrashic source that God himself endowed the snake with two unusual qualities above and beyond that of other animals, that it could walk upright and that it had the power of speech. So it's plainly there in the oral Torah explaining how the snake comes to speak. Now, this angel Samael selected the snake for his purpose. He descended to earth and rode on the back of the snake like on a camel, imbuing the snake with his spirit. Whatever the snake spoke henceforth was inspired by Samael. Not Samuel, Samael. And some rabbis call it Samach Mem. They don't even say his name. They call it Samach Mem. Before they sinned, evil impulses were not integrated into the personality of Adam and Chava, but they were totally pure and good. Now the snake / Samael approached them with a proposition to taste from the tree of knowledge, to instill into themselves the knowledge of evil. Okay? And there's all kinds of reasons why they agreed. There's an explanation here that they wanted to sin and then to repent and show that they would always remain good. That really gets into like Kabbalistic type of thinking. So the snake reasoned, any attempt to seduce Adam is certainly doomed to failure. Let me first approach the woman, because women listen and are more easily persuaded. The snake waited for a time when Adam was asleep and struck up a conversation with Chava, asking her, did Hashem instruct you not to eat from any fruit in the garden? If you're not allowed to eat from them, why then were they created? And so on and so forth. She said we're not allowed to touch them, which was not true, not to eat, not to touch. And he bumped her and touched them. So you see, nothing happened. And anyhow, she came to eat. I want to stop here and say that one of the things that the serpent saw from the Hebrew verses, what tempted the serpent was that he saw, this is based on verses, that he saw them having marital relations. And he got desirous of Eve, and that's why he persuaded her first. That's why he attacked her first, you could say. And the way the commentaries put it is that the serpent actually injected into her. It was like a kind of rape. It was a kind of like a kind of illicit, illegal sexual act that he injected into her. It's called ruach zurma, an impure spirit. So she became defiled in that way. And that's going to be the background information for why it's so important to observe the laws of morality, of sexual morality, especially adultery, which is considered to be such a great sin, because what the serpent did here, mixing into the relationship between Adam and Eve, is that he basically caused her to fall victim to an act of adultery. It was a kind of an adulterous union. We can't understand exactly how, because it's a serpent and this is a woman, and how exactly. But, there are scenes, in books and in movies of women with snakes. There's something about it. As a matter of fact, there's a myth about, talking of myths, that Alexander the Great Roman general and conqueror, that he believed that he was descended or somehow connected to a relationship between his mother and a snake, because apparently his father did find Alexander's mother once cavorting with the snake in bed, and he flew into a fit of jealous rage. But there is this myth that floats around that some people are descended. They like to say that. But where does that altogether come from? Why does that have a hold on the psyche of people and in mythology? Well, it's biblical in origin, because you see here that the serpent seduced Eve, and it's considered to be as if he had an illicit relationship with her. He broke the bond between Adam and Eve, and that led to the downfall of man. It's the original sin, okay? It's the cardinal sin. What's the cardinal sin? It's not that she ate an apple, blah, blah, so that makes it into a sin. No, she ate the forbidden fruit, a tree of knowledge of good and evil. That means she imbibed the capacity to feel evil, to experience evil, to go over to the dark side, as they say. And because of that, she was now susceptible to sin, to the opposite of a mitzvah, the opposite of doing good, the opposite of blessing, the opposite of holiness. This is profanity. This is, that's what we call it, a profanity, a disgusting act, because she somehow or other imbibed that chemical, that spiritual chemical from the tree of knowledge of good and evil that corrupted her soul, and therefore corrupted her body, corrupted her mind, corrupted her desires, corrupted her everything. And therefore it resulted in the fall of man. And this is going to be the job of ultimately of the Jewish people, of the Bnei Yisrael and the Jewish people, to be mesaken the chet of Adam HaRishon, to fix the sin of Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon means the first man, Adam. And it's not so simple, because remember, it says, B'yom acholcha matamut. God told Adam and Eve, on the day you eat from this tree, you shall surely die. Now, they didn't drop dead. Eve didn't drop dead. Adam didn't drop dead. In fact, it says God had mercy on them. There's commentary that says, no, well, okay, let them live 1,000 years and then let them die. But when is the first death in the Torah? It's when Cain kills Abel. We'll see that in the next chapter. Cain kills Abel. The first death is actually a murder. So that's where that death sort of comes in an unexpected way. It's the same way, the way the serpent is presented, like, ta-da! Serpent out of nowhere, 2 lovely chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, about the 6 days of creation and Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. And then, ta-da, out of nowhere. There's no background information. Nothing is said in the Torah. Suddenly we're just presented, voila, a serpent. Mercifully, thankfully, we have an oral Torah. We have the commentators and the commentaries, the rabbinical commentaries, Talmudic commentaries, Midrashic commentaries, mystical commentaries, all sorts of commentaries that help us with understanding the background, give us that additional background information. So let's just look at a couple of things I want to see here. We can start with the Rashi, and that is the punishment that was given to the woman, because she's a key character. That's why I'm focusing on her. God said, El Ha'isha Amar, to the woman, he said, God said, Harba arbe itzvanech v'heranech. I will greatly multiply the pain of your travail in the etzem tel dibanim. With in pain you'll bring forth children, ve'el ishech teshukasech, and to your husband will be your desire. One verse. This is Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. Let's see how I just read to you from this Isaiah and Schaffman translation. Let's see how Aryeh Kaplan translates verse 16. Here it is, the woman's curse. To the woman he said, that's talking about God, to the woman he said, I will greatly increase your anguish and your pregnancy. It will be with anguish that you will give birth to children. Your passion will be to your husband, and he will dominate you. This touches on so many things. Very sensitive point. Women's libbers, just hang on to your hats here. Don't freak out, because there have been improvements over the millennia, and in modern times, things are getting better. But originally, what is the origin of the subjugation of women to men? You have Adam and Eve, that, right? According to the biblical narrative, they were created equal. They were created actually conjoined. Later, God split them to face each other. And there's no indication that one is inferior to the other, just that one comes from the other. Okay, so one comes from the other. In fact, they have similar names, Ish and Isha, man and woman. Like even in English, you have man, woman. They're the same, just one comes from the other. So it's like a kind of copy. Where do you see that the original is superior? The original is the two combined, right? So the original is the two of them together. That's the Adam. The Adam is a man and a woman, like it says in the Torah, that they should become a man and a husband. A man leaves his mother, his father and mother, and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. So there is oneness in a man and woman, a husband and wife. So where do you see, what's the origin that a woman should be inferior to a man? And only in modern times has it become actually feasible that women have attained more equality. And they have, I'm not saying they haven't, in various forms. Not in halacha so much, not in Jewish law, but certainly in life and in the world and in spheres outside of Jewish legal practice, you could say, Torah law. Women have basically total equality. Women are the breadwinners. Women are doctors, lawyers, accountants, prime ministers, maybe even now we have a vice president, a woman, no problem. But what is the origin? So the origin for the problem that women suffer is because she was the first to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil through the machinations of the serpent. Okay, so in law there's a concept of you can't come to a judge and say, if you commit a crime, the devil made me do it. That's a famous principle. I don't know the Latin, but it comes from a Latin expression. You cannot show up in court and ask, so why did you murder this guy? Or why did you rob the store? Judge, Your Honor, the devil made me do it. Try that and see how far you get. It doesn't work. You can't say the devil made you, because you're a human being. You have freedom of choice. You have control over your actions. Just because you had an impulse and a thought doesn't mean you had to act on it. So you should have controlled your impulses, not murdered that person. You should have controlled your impulses, not robbed that person. Same thing with the Nazis. They came along and they said, we were following orders. Well, what do you mean you were following orders? Don't you have a brain? Don't you have a mind? Don't you have a heart? Don't you have an intellect? Can't you think for yourself? Sometimes there are higher orders. Don't you know that there's a moral code? Don't you, in the Judeo-Christian world, in the Western world, we believe in the Bible. We have a moral code. Thou shalt not murder. It's not thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, right? And even if you say, translated as thou shalt not kill, it's even more. So you cannot come to the judge and say, the devil made me do it. So the woman cannot claim the snake made me do it. It's true he did, but it was her choice as well. She's viewed as a responsible adult, right? No blaming third parties here. And no blaming the victim either, because she's not a victim. She made the choice and now she must face the music. And it's all in this verse. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. Take a look at it. And it says, "Be'etzem tel divanim, in pain they shall bring forth children." Let's see Rashi. This will be the first time in the series that we're looking at Rashi. I love this Rashi because it's so bang to the point. It's vernech, thy pain. God said to the woman, "It's harba arbe, I'll increase its vernech, its avon, pain." What does it mean? It's vernech, because there's different kinds of things that are described here. Knocks that the lady gets. So it's from the Talmud Erevin, right? It's a tractate called Erevin. And Rashi brings us, this is the beauty of Rashi. Rashi, the commentator who brings comments from the oral law and puts it in very succinctly next to certain verses. He says, Zed tsar gidel banim. This is the trouble of rearing children. Tsar gidel banim, meaning you're going to have difficulty raising your children. Parenting is not easy. You're going to have pain from that. It's painful. Okay? I'll greatly increase your pains in rearing children. Heironech, and thy travail he's got here. Zed tsar ha'ibur. This refers to the trouble of pregnancy. So pregnancy itself for a woman is painful. It's an ordeal. 9 months of pregnancy. That's why some women choose not to be pregnant. That's why people practice birth control for a long time. They don't want to be pregnant. Women don't want to be pregnant. And that's because it is painful. You really have to have a noble, committed, very, very spiritual outlook to really want to have children, right? So that tsar ha'ibur. Be'etzem tel dibanim, in pain you shall bring forth children. Zet tsar haleda. This is the pain of giving birth. So you have the pain of child rearing, the pain of pregnancy, and then the child, and then the childbirth. And here's the humdinger. Ve'el ishech teshukasech, and to your husband shall be your desire. For what? Letashmish, for marital life. Tashmish actually means for sex, for sexual intercourse. You'll desire him for sexual intercourse. Va'afal pikein ein lach metzach letavaboy, and nevertheless you won't be able to have the guts, the effrontery to demand it from him. He has the say. The man has the privilege to dominate, to be the first one to initiate. That's the classical, male dominated society. Everything from him and not from you. Teshukasech, your desire, is tavasech, your sexual desire. Kama Yeshaya. And Rashi says it's like a verse from Isaiah, that is Isaiah 29, verse 8, says Nefesh Shakeka, and his soul desires. So he says he's bringing a proof that Teshukasech is from the same word Shakeka. Shakeka is a desire. Okay? Now, the Medrash adds a couple of additional things to Eve's pains, and I wanted to share that with you. The woman's verdict, focusing on the woman's verdict. Hashem pronounced upon the woman 9 curses. The Medrash elucidates 9 curses to be followed by death. Hashem said to her, number 1, you will experience the discomfort of menstruation. So the discomfort, women have menstrual pain. They take medications sometimes for it. The pain of menstruation is also one of the punishments that women were given, Eve as the progenitress of all women, of all womankind. Number two, you will become a nida through your first marital relations, meaning nida is a state of spiritual impurity that a woman experiences when she menstruates. During the time that she's a nida, this is talking about a religious, Torah-observant woman, does not have sexual relations with her husband. She's actually forbidden to her husband. We'll see, these are actual commandments in the Torah. So that goes by a monthly cycle for most women from the time they become adolescents till around the age of 40 plus or so. So for about almost 30 years, you could say, a woman menstruates, plus minus. But then there's a different kind of dam nida. That's when she has sex for the first time. When she loses her virginity and her hymen is broken, there is a bleeding. And it also becomes painful. So she becomes a nida and it's painful. So that's a second thing. 3, raising your children will involve great trouble and self-sacrifice. So that we saw, that the Tsar Gidel Banim, you'll have to go through hardships involved in raising babies. Your pregnancies will cause you distress and discomfort. So we saw that. Pregnancy will cause distress and discomfort. Number 5, you will endure the pains of labor pains. So that's number 5. Number 6, even though your husband will dominate you and it is natural for a slave to attempt to escape from his master, you will not flee but will seek out his subjugation. So women, and this is like in psychology, they try to figure out why are women so prone to abusive relationships, they call it, That's when it's abusive. But in other cases, women want to be with men, right? Men want to be with women, but also women really are hungry for a male companionship, as are men. I'm not saying men are not hungry for female companionship. Of course they are. But there's something extra in the way women seek it out from men. Number 7, but you will keep your desire in your heart. In addition to which, women have a great desire for their man, but they're not really able to express it fully. It's considered to be rude and very forward. When a woman comes on strong to a man, it's like, hey, this is like a little bit too much. Number 8, you'll be confined to your house and you will not be able to appear in public with your hair uncovered. So for millennia, women covered their hair. It's only in modern times that women have cast off their hair coverings, but in all ancient and even other cultures, women cover their hair. In modern times, women uncover their hair. But in Torah Judaism, in observant Judaism, women cover their hair either with the cloth or a wig, and they do not leave their house with their hair uncovered. And it's a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing. So that's one of the curses, you could say, that comes about from the cardinal sin. Number 9, you will not be accepted as a witness in Beis Din. This is very serious, as I mentioned. In Jewish law, this still applies. Everything else might have gotten easier. Menstruation, you can take medication to knock it off. You can have even a little incision made before the first sexual encounters. Raising children, you can get your nanny to raise your children. Pregnancies, you don't have to be pregnant, or women can find easy ways to be pregnant. You will have to endure the pains of labor. You can have an epidural. You don't have to suffer pain. Most women today, children are born with epidurals in America. Even though your husband will dominate you, most women are not dominated by their husbands today. Most women can express their desires quite openly and freely to their man and to their husbands. Most women are not confined to their houses, and most women don't cover their hair. And if they cover their hair, they cover them sometimes with the most beautiful wigs, and they look even nicer. Like you have actresses in movies, they look nicer with their wigs on when they're acting than they do in real life. But this thing, You will not be accepted as a witness in a Beis Din. Yes, in a secular court, a woman can be accepted as a witness, but not in an Orthodox Beth Din. A Beth Din means a court of Jewish law. Women are not accepted as witnesses. Women cannot act as judges. That still remains. And then finally, death. And by the way, it says, once Adam had listened to and believed his wife, it was decreed that women could no longer be trusted as witnesses. This is also from a Midrashic source, Radal. And the final thing is death. So we went through the punishments that Eve was given. There was punishments given to the serpent. He lost his power of speech, lost his legs. Adam has to work hard for a living. And of course, there's the decree of death. But they don't die. They live a long time. God had mercy on them. He let them live a long time. And the first death will come in the next chapter, Genesis chapter 4, with the struggle between Cain and Abel, the two of the children of Adam and Eve. Thank you very much for listening. I'm signing off. If you have any questions, please feel free. My email is rudomin@jpi.org or rudomin@att.net. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.